Well, welcome back, single mamas. We have McKelty Bloom with us again, and we are going to talk. It's not just with fostering, but with parenting in general. But we were talking about foster care and if you're ready and the different styles of parenting. And so McKelty is a social worker who works in this area. She teaches workshops, she trains people, and their attachment styles. And we're going to just talk about understanding your attachment style and how it affects your parenting. And I'm going to let McKelty just roll with this. So go ahead and just share with us all of your information.
Yes, well, I'm really happy to be back and really happy to talk about this subject. I'm incredibly passionate about attachment. And when we hear the word attachment, we think of, oh, being attached to a person. Maybe you have a personal belonging, like a blanket from your childhood or something that you feel attached to. But today we're really focusing on that attachment. So that affectionate relationship that you have with your kids. And I don't think we know that much about attachment as we should, as we are just growing into parents and understanding our relationships with other peers and romantic relationships and such. But again, we're really going to look at today, and I want to just share a little bit more on that attachment between a child and a caregiver. And actually, we got to look at the base first. So we're going to briefly just give you a little biology lesson and development lesson. So your attachment is formed by your caregiver, usually between the ages of 0 to 3. Those are your prime time attachment moments and developmentally. And that really, you just think of it as a circle and a cycle. So a child has a need, they're crying, they have a dirty diaper, and then the parent meets that need. So they're going to, reassure them, help them regulate, change their diaper, soothe them. And what the child is learning at that point is that, oh, my caregiver will take care of me. They can help me through that. And when that cycle is continuing to go in just as it is, you develop this secure and healthy attachment. But there are a lot of times where that cycle is broken, and it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be from trauma or just an absent parent, not a very responsive or minimizing parent. And so this child has a need, they're crying, they're in distress for any reason. But what happens when that caregiver doesn't meet the need consistently in those ways? And so at that point, what a child has to learn is to regulate on their own. Some of you might hear that more as like those survival instincts kick in with kids, and they're like, I can only depend on myself. I can't trust anybody. So that's what happens at that point. Children actually are not able to regulate on their own until they're 3 years old. So they absolutely need that person and that caregiver in their life to show them, this is how you regulate. This is how you calm down. So it's really important to have that base and understanding before we jump into this next piece.
Yep.
But once you are kind of growing into an adolescence and an adult, you have what we call a specific attachment style. And your attachment style is that specific way of relating to others in a relationship. So how do you feel towards somebody in a trusting way? Or if you don't trust people, do you have people close to you? Do you push them away? Do you feel empathy towards others? All of that is based off of your attachment style and how you were parented. And granted, it is true that you can have a different type of style based off of different people in your life. Because for me, it's like I might be way closer to one parent in my life than the other. We might have different attachment styles, but overall, you have that one. So though there's 4 different styles. The first one is secure attachment, which is more that healthy cycle that we talked about earlier, where you have a need, the caregiver responds in a nurturing and positive way. And so you're learning that you can trust people. You're able to build relationships easily and quickly. As a parent, you are more hands-on and nurturing because that's what you experienced as a child as well. And I just want to sidebar and to really highlight that is the way we were parented is going to unconsciously happen when we parent our kids. I have heard so many times people say, I'm never going to parent like my dad parented me, right?
Right.
We hear that all the time. But unfortunately, there are going to be ways where all of a sudden you do something and you're like, oh my gosh, I sounded just like my mom.
Yes,
Or,
exactly.
right? It takes you by surprise.
I wanted to do.
Yeah, like I swore I would never do that, and I just did it.
Right.
The reason for that is because that's your attachment style coming into play. You know, the way we were parented is going to come out. So we need to acknowledge that and to be mindful of it because it impacts how you parent your kids. So that's this first attachment style, the secure attachment. And then you have the other three that are categorized more in an insecure attachment type, because along the way, when you were developing as an infant and a child, something occurred, whether it was trauma or just a dismissive parent or someone who maybe your parent had to work 3 jobs. And so you didn't really see them that often. So you kind of had to fend for yourself. One of those reasons is going to cause this insecure attachment. And the first one is avoidant. So an avoidant attachment is caused by a parent that is very dismissive and minimizing to your needs, might seem uncaring. So for you as a child, what you learned is you didn't really have distress when your caregiver left and dropped you off at daycare. You weren't really too excited to see them when they picked you up, just because they never showed that emotion and connection with you in the first place. So you weren't really depending on them in a lot of ways.
Right.
So when you have an avoidant attachment style as an adult, so now let's say you're in the dating field, you're hanging out, you have a tendency to push people away. When things are hard, when you're in hard circumstances, you just kind of choose to run. You don't want to deal with a lot of the hard issues. And that's just because that was how you were parented.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually 25% of adults have this avoidant attachment style. So there's that the hard time trusting others. Some of you might have said in the past, like, why can't I just trust people? Why do I think everyone is out to get me? And feeling, why am I so emotionally unavailable in my relationships? That might be because you have this avoidant attachment style.
Makes sense.
Yes, because that's what you experienced, and you experienced that dismissive behavior. So with your kids, when you're looking at kids who either your biological children or foster children that are coming in the home, when they're behaving poorly and they're mad and they're yelling at you, instead of wanting to confront and be present and calm in the situation to support them, you might have that tendency to want to push away and be like, I'm not dealing with this.
Yeah.
So that might be something to look out for. And in those moments, finding that support in all of this and understanding in all of this, but working to that place where you can be present and be there for the kids, because they need you to be that solid person when they're having their meltdowns.
Right. And recognizing these tendencies and traits and where they come from makes a big difference, because like you said, it's in our subconscious. We aren't thinking it. We don't want to do these things, but it's just there. And recognizing where it came from and why it's there, I think can make a big difference in overcoming them.
Mm-hmm. Because, you can't, it's a staple, statement of, you can't work on yourself unless you acknowledge what's wrong.
Right.
We can't be putting in that work unless we look back and see some of those deep issues that we would rather avoid and not think about, to be able to move forward, to best be there and present for our kids.
Right.
So the next attachment style is called ambivalent, or sometimes known as anxious attachment style. And this is around 20% of adults. And how this is developed is, you as a child, your parents, sometimes when you had a need, was super hands-on, super nurturing and caring, but other times took on more of that dismissive and minimizing approach. Yeah. And so as a child, you have a lot of sadness and fear when your parent, drops you off and you don't know where they are, but you're really unsure when your parent picks you up and aren't really super excited to see them. A good example to visualize with this is, you often see this attachment style with kids who have parents that are struggling with substance abuse, that are alcoholics. Coming into the home, you kind of don't know what parent you're going to get, trying to figure out, have they been drinking? Are they going to be abusive or mean to me, helpful? So this is a attachment style we see a lot in those ways. You just don't know what parent you're going to get.
Yeah, makes sense for that.
Yeah. And so growing up as an adult in other relationships, you are very insecure in your relationships. So going back to that anxiety piece, you might be overly clingy and, oh my gosh, they didn't text me back in 2 days. That means they hate me. They don't want to see me anymore. Always really worried that your friendships are going to leave you. That's kind of something I experienced, and having that fear of, oh my gosh, do they hate me? I haven't talked with them for in a couple of months, and kind of overcompensating in a lot of ways with your friends to try to make sure that they're with you and you're a partner in your relationships. Really anxious and hungry for validation. Always, do you love me? Are you sure you want to be with me? To the point where you might drive them away. And so with kids, that absolutely can make an impact where you might have a lot of fear for their safety. Always worried, are they okay? Do they love me? Am I doing a good enough job as a parent? So just having a lot of those really exhausting and overwhelming feelings as a parent in those ways can be tough. So that's with that ambivalent anxious behavior. And the last one is a disorganized attachments type. And that is when, as a parent, as a child, your parent maybe responded in very abusive ways, frightening ways. And so for you, you really have no attaching behavior as a child. So we can really tell when we're working with kids in foster care who have experienced trauma, or just people in general, based on how they're responding to their parents, if that's something that they have experienced, because they don't really have any, they kind of seem like they're in like la la land and really oblivious. And when they're around their caregiver, because they just don't get anything from them. And when they do, it's really frightening or scary situations.
Sure.
So with that, this is that combination of both of the styles that we talked about and how they might behave as an adult. Really reluctant to develop relationships, that mindset of you're just going to hurt me like everybody else. Really insecure and not feeling loved by others, and can be associated with significant psychological and other related risks. These people have more of an increased risk of being vulnerable, being trafficked in a lot of ways, and being taken advantage of, being in domestic violence situations in themselves, just because of this attachment style. And so really, when I hear people that are talking about, women who are in, domestic violence situations or things like that, and asking, why do they keep going back? Or why don't they see this as an issue? So much of that goes back to their specific attachment style, and maybe being raised in themselves with a disorganized attachment type. So there's so much more that goes into it.
You'd almost think that with that last one, they wouldn't trust anybody. They'd be detached from everything, and they would be less likely, but they're more likely to fall into more abuse. That's really sad.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes both ways. This is obviously just that framework, but they're depending on your personality and so certain circumstances. But I spoke with a single mom actually when I taught on this, who just was bawling. She was in her 50s and just said, I just don't feel anything. I don't feel anything for anyone. I'm just apathetic. And my kids, I just don't feel connected. And so much of that came back to this disorganized attachment style. And once she was able to understand that, we can do some work. And how do we heal from that? How do we recover? Because with looking specifically, going back to with this style with your kids, it absolutely impacts. If you don't have that connection, if you don't feel that empathy or that nurturing, they're not getting that from you. And so what does that cycle look like moving forward for them? And doesn't mean there's something wrong, quote, wrong with you. You hear that a lot. It just means that there's some deep work that has to be discovered and some healing that has to happen from things in the past in that way.
Well, it's good to be able to recognize these things and maybe what category you fall into. And for your own kids, or if you're thinking of foster, maybe you need some counseling yourself before you can begin this. And if you're having trouble relating with your kids, and you see, oh, I kind of fall into this category, but I don't know how to overcome it, then counseling is a good option. And there's so many good places you can get counseling now. And there's nothing wrong with counseling. I advise counseling all the time
Oh
because
yeah.
we need it. We need somebody we can talk to. And it's usually not a family member, because family, for one, doesn't usually forgive the things you can forgive. And they might be a big part of the problem.
Yeah.
But just obviously, before you go into fostering, you want to make sure that you have these tendencies in a healthy place. And with your own kids, we want to have to be the healthiest person we can be, because we're training our kids and we're teaching them these styles as well. And we want to teach them the best styles so they have a healthy life as well. And, none of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
We're all going to have that moment where, oh, I just did what my mom just did and I said I would never do. We're all going to have those moments. But, and it's not to beat yourself up when you look at these things, but to look at them and recognize them and say, oh, what can I do to be better? What can I do to overcome this? So this doesn't control me. It might be a part of me, but it doesn't have to control my behaviors. And some of that I believe we can do on our own. Obviously, we can take things to the Lord. He is the healer and the one who can heal those inner things. But you may need counseling, and that would be a perfect option for you to look to. Any
Yeah.
suggestions you have for moms?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to echo what you just said. I think anybody going into foster care should absolutely connect with a therapist. There are some adoption competent therapists out there too that really understand it and foster care and what these kids have been through. So they would be a great tool just to process. And I, again, am a huge advocate for counseling and therapy. You don't go just because there's something wrong with you. You go because we're always improving, we're always learning and growing.
Yep.
And so making sure that you are just talking through, bring your attachment style, because I am 98% sure that all of you listening have already identified what your attachment style is.
I got
Just
one right here.
Yep. Just from you talking about it and hearing it, you start to understand what you think yours is, and bringing that information, doing some research. I would encourage everyone to Google just attachment styles. And there's a really good website that I used, and I actually was able to take a quiz to find my attachment type, and it gives you a little bit more detailed information. And it's on mindbodygreen.com. And I can send you the link to the specific article I'm thinking of in the quiz that allows people to learn more. But just doing the work, because we want to be the best parents we can be for our kids, just like you said. And if we're able to learn in the moment that when my child is yelling at me, that tendency for me to just push away and to isolate and run away is my avoidant attachment style. So how can I work so that I can be that present person and that grounded parent they need in the moment while they're having their own mini freak out?
You don't have to have a freak out with them.
Yes. So, but I love that you said it's just an affirmation too of we are not perfect people. We are far from perfect. So we are going to have our moments where we mess up and we say things we don't want to, but coming back to the table and of course apologizing, but doing the work. And hopefully that this was just a little piece of affirmation for some of you that might have been really beating yourself up on, why am I so bad in relationships? Why can't I trust people? To give a little insight that it doesn't mean you're quote messed up and in any way, that there's just some healing that needs to happen and some relearning in how to trust these relationships.
Retraining our mind and emotions is something that can be done. It's not the impossible thing. We just need to recognize it and find the help that we need, the right people that can help us. I am so grateful that you have shared all of this with us. And I think it's going to help all moms, not just single moms and not just foster moms, but all of us. All parents need this, because we all have this tendency. So I just want to thank you again. And we will list the website that you have noted. And if you give me any other resources, I'll also list those on our website so that people can find it. And I just thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. So it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you, single mamas, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again, and just join us at singlemamas.org and our Facebook page, our Facebook group. And we just are so thankful for you and hope that our talks and our resources help you on your journey of parenting. Thank you so much for joining us today.